What's up, everybody? So, welcome to episode 5, I believe, of Building Web3 Anything in Bubble. And we got some pretty cool stuff we're going to kick off today. It's going to be a little bit of an adventure because I'm actually going to be basically trying to figure this out as I go. But you can come along with me and, we'll kind of hit any bumps in the road together. And like anything, when you're building, you might come across blockers. So a big part of building is trying to, navigate through those, around those, and figure out, innovative solutions sometimes to interesting features and functionality. So the goal today, so this will probably be a multi-parter just because, again, much respect to the Friendtech team. I know they've had their fair share of controversy and things like that, but I think from a product perspective and a technology perspective, I think they've really kind of pushed the boundaries in terms of Web3, right? Particularly in terms of UX and the mobile UX and the mobile experience. So that's what we're going to explore. I think in this particular segment, what we're going to focus on is just ground up, right? I'm going to be starting from a completely blank slate. So I think this will also be good for beginners who are looking to build in Bubble for the first time. We'll be starting from the same, starting point. And I think what we'll focus on is kind of that onboarding experience, coupled with their pretty clever usage of something called PWAs. So for those who aren't familiar, that's a progressive web application. And what you're looking at on the screen here is a screen share from my phone. So this is the Friendtech app. And if you look at it, you'd be hard pressed to figure out if this was a native, this is an Android, but basically same exact experience on an iPhone. But you'd be hard pressed to, kind of figure out if this was a native app or not, right? And that's kind of the goal of a progressive web app. At the end of the day, I think the technical definition is just a web application using more traditional, web technologies and web languages like HTML, JavaScript, CSS styling, etc. But making it look and feel and behave as if it were a native application. And I think, I mentioned this on a couple episodes prior where I think, and speaking to Joseph and Tim and others, I really think we're at this inflection point where a couple of different technologies are just starting to hit a cusp and come together such that you can build really compelling experiences for the average user, not just for Web3 users, but for the average user, and have it be low-key Web3. I mean, that's kind of the mantra, right? Have something that is augmented and empowered with Web3 features, but not necessarily need, having those up front and center. I think the core and the key thing is still making it accessible to the average non-Web3 user, and that's what we're going to explore today. So again, part one, what we're going to do, so you just, you see it here, a web application that looks and feels like a native app. Generally speaking, the way these are usually set up is as a single page application. So that's another term. If you're a builder, you may come across. Sometimes they abbreviate it as SPA. And similarly, progressive web application, you might see that abbreviation PWA. That's what those mean. So single page application is pretty straightforward in terms of what it means. Basically, it is an entire experience, user experience, built, again, technically on a single web page. I guess that kind of makes sense. But, rather than traditionally, as you navigate, as you click buttons, in the old sense, you're going from page to page. A single page application uses a slightly different framework. What you're really dealing with there is, I kind of think of them as views rather than pages. So you're basically hiding and showing views depending on certain triggers and how you set up the page. So I am not completely sure that that's how they're set up, but that's how I would imagine they are. But we're going to build something using that kind of similar framework, because generally speaking, if you're building a progressive web application, you don't want to have this kind of loading, behavior between screens. It kind of throws off the effect. And then secondly, if you're ever thinking about actually wrapping your application to be deployed like more formally in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, again, the best practice typically is to have that be a single page application, right? So without further ado, I did want to do one quick preview here. And this is the one.GALLERY application. This is 100% built in Bubble. And as you can see here, there's some subtle things. So I did actually install this, onto my homepage, as you can see. So I can click it like it's, like it's an app. And then there's other subtle things, like you might notice there's no search bar, right? So that is actually super easy to do in Bubble. And I'll show you how to do it. All right, and we will have a live Google Meet, a little bit of an experimental thing, but if you actually do want to hop into the Google Meet, I believe it is in the description, and we can have have some live questions while I'm working. I did get some good feedback from a prior viewer to say that I should just kind of keep working as best I can, even when I'm having conversations, because otherwise it kind of breaks the flow. So we'll try to do that this time around. All right, so switching gears, let's just jump into this thing. So this is Bubble. If you haven't seen it before, it's a fantastic no-code platform. We are literally going to just create a new one from scratch. You know what? Let's just have some fun here. Let's see if anybody's taken his name. No. All right. Cool. Yeah, no thanks. I'll skip this. So, when you first jump in, you'll be creating an app. You can either create it from a template, or you can create it from scratch. So, since we're going to be building a single page application, I wanted to walk through the framework and how to start to set that up, but also just some of the blocking and tackling, right? So again, blank slate, where do you start? Again, for someone who's completely new to Bubble, it can be a little intimidating. Even with a lot of these little tutorials and things like that, we're actually just gonna skip out of this. So here it is. For anybody who's ever been a painter or a writer or a programmer, or a playwright, or what have you, one of the most intimidating things for a creator or an artist is the blank page. So it's okay, we've all been there, and we'll work through this together. So one of the first things I'm going to do actually is just start to lay the groundwork. There are some actual plugins that we're going to need. Not all of them maybe for this first session, but what we're going to do is we're going to have the groundwork for some of our Web3 functionality in place. So, again, as we build out, maybe for future parts, as we start to delve into other features, we'll get into that as well. So one of the first things I'm going to do, I'm actually going to set my app up as an agency account. Oh, okay. Let's see. Just got a quick note here. Yeah, okay, hold on a second here. I'm going to do a quick thing, share my screen on the Google Meet as well in case anybody joins there. There we go. All right, cool. Nice. All right. Good stuff. So what we're going to do here, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to an agency plan. So this is a special plan for basically agencies and builders. This is something that if you, let's say if you sign up as like for a day of development with one to all, something I'm happy to jump in and set your account to. What it basically offers you is like open-ended building. So free access to any plugin, again, basically paid or not. And also, no kind of workload units or anything like that. So we're going to start off with that first step, just so we can just start to install all these plugins and, frankly, not have to worry about whether it's paid or not. We just want to build, right? So what I'm going to do here is there are a couple of basic things that are just handy to have. So the API connector is a really good one to have. This is actually good that they're suggesting a bunch of these. Toolbox, if we ever want to use some JavaScript, that's also a good one to have. Multi-select dropdown is one from Bubble itself. Not a bad one to have. And for now, I think those are some of the core ones that we need. We are going to also start to implement the Web3 plugins, right? So first and foremost, one of the ones we're going to need is Web3 Auth. That's going to give us connectivity. And secondly, we're going to need Web3 and MetaMask. Again, maybe not for this first session, but just in case we need to, for instance, send any tokens, potentially send down the road, transfer an NFT, things like that. We're going to want that as well. So let's actually, here we go. Yeah, confirm. Got it. And we got Web3 Auth. That's cool. Let's see. We also want to get Web3 and MetaMask. Subscribe to that. And finally, for now, we may add more as we go. I have a little bit of a pet plugin. It's completely free. It's just like a laundry list of API calls that come in handy every now and again. So I'm going to install that one just in case. Okay, so I think we have a bit of a starter set. What we're going to do also is do a quick run through of how to set up the Web3 Auth client ID. So let's do that. So to set up your Web3 Auth client ID, what you basically want to do is go to dashboard.web3auth.io. You can log in with any, any of your credentials. So I actually think the Google login is pretty handy. So we're going to use that one for now. And for our purposes, we're already going to have an account, but I'll show you how to spin up another client ID just in case. So while this is loading, I think, again, it's important to kind of recap, why does this matter, right? So I heard a really interesting stat last week on a Twitter/X space, which said, I think it was, an entrepreneur who was actually doing something in the MMA space. And he's looking to build out some pretty cool loyalty programs for his fans and his customers. And he said they built some Web3, some cool Web3 applications, and they had both. They had desktop applications, and in their case, they had native mobile apps. So App Store apps. But he said 97% of his users opted to come in through the mobile apps. Right, so 97%, that's a pretty huge amount. But I think that's pretty indicative of where, the average user is, right? So if we're going to build something that's low-key Web3, we're going to have to meet users, where they are. So that's again, when that kind of when I heard that stat, I was like, that's one, that's not surprising, but two, that's like, oh, wow, we gotta kind of think in that direction and try to innovate so that we can get to those 97% of users much easier, much faster, and ideally with a lower cost, right? Like a lower barrier to entry. So here we are in the Web3 Auth dashboard. I'm going to spin up a new project, and I'll call it Friendtech clone. We're going to use the plugin play kit. That's what the plugin uses. So select that. It is a web application. So again, progressive web application. We are going to use, for now, so Sapphire is what Web3 Auth is migrating to. For now, I'm going to stick to legacy mainnet. And that's traditionally what we've used in the past. I think Sapphire is up and running, but just for now, we're going to kind of stick to what works. And we do want EVM-based. So again, for those who aren't familiar, EVM is the Ethereum virtual machine. It's effectively the language. Well, technically, it's the compiler. It's the thing that interprets the language. But basically, it's any chain that is Solidity based, and Solidity is the language of Ethereum, the programming language of Ethereum. So not only does this let us target things like Ethereum and Polygon, but it lets us target all these level 2s, alt chains, etc. So it's very open-ended. And allow the user's private key usage in given wallets. What that, I think, allows for is someone who can log in with, let's say, the Taurus app. So Web3 Auth was actually built by the same team that built the Taurus wallet. And so this is good to have. It's not a bad option to have. So we're going to create this project. All right. So we're almost there, actually. So we have our client ID. I'm actually going to just pop back in and just start to drop that in. So that's our client ID. But we do have one more thing we need to do. We're going to preview our beautiful blank page. And actually, one of the things that happens for agency apps is they do put a password on it by default. And I think I may need to reload this. And this isn't a huge secret, I guess, but the default for the username and password is username and password. So not the most secure thing. I would definitely suggest changing that if you're ever working on something that is in stealth mode. So here we are. We can see the blank page, but down below you can see the debugger. So we are definitely in there. And what we're going to want to do is actually copy in the domain. So we want to whitelist our domain. That's actually one of the main things we need to do to get this up and running and working. So we'll come back to that. If we hit a little blocker on the whitelist, we can always come back to this. But for now, we're pretty much set. And let's come back to our application here. So I like to do a quick Bubble 101. Again, if this is the first video somebody's watching, first time they're seeing Bubble, quick overview of Bubble. It is a WYSIWYG no-code development platform. WYSIWYG stands for what you see is what you get. And the really cool thing is I can drop, let's say we get started here. I'm just going to drop an image. And one of the things that I actually just did a little bit previously, I'm going to flip over to so you can see, I dropped into Bing. So for those who don't know, Bing has, so Microsoft, they have a partnership with ChatGPT, or rather OpenAI. And basically you can get pretty good access to GPT-4, which is typically a paid product. You can get pretty good access to GPT-4 features just by going into Bing. So one of which is one that they just released, which is text to image. I literally just asked, hey, give me a nice chat icon for a mobile app. These are pretty good ones right off the bat. So I'm actually going to just pull in one of the icons. And there we go. We got our chat icon here. And the other cool thing about Bubble is I hit preview, so I have the preview page open. Every time I make a change to the application, it is refreshing and reloading in real time. And for anybody who hasn't necessarily done traditional coding before, this is awesome. Like, to be able to just make changes, flip over, and in seconds see what you just built, that is not like a typical thing. that's not usually how coding works. So as you can see, I added that image, and there it is. So that's kind of the crux of what you see is what you get, right? And definitely as we kind of build this out further, you'll see, because at the end of the day, there are things that are programmatic and dynamic. The goal isn't necessarily to see the web page exactly as it's going to be rendered here, because again, we're going to have other elements. These elements are going to be pulling variables and data and things like that. But as you get used to looking at it, you can definitely get more comfortable, basically having a pretty good idea of what this thing is going to look like when it's rendered as a web page, and also if there are things that are not rendering correctly, why that might be happening. Because, like, let's say for a very simple case, I have an icon above above something. Let's actually just start to put in some text here. And you know what? I am actually going to, in parallel, look at the Friendtech page. And just look at some of their text here. So yeah, I can start to drop in some text. So and what I might actually look to do is just start to do some styling here too. Railway is kind of cool. Let's see. Let's try English actually. There we go. All right. So, like I said, it's not always going to translate into what you see exactly on the page. In this case, we're actually using something called a fixed layout. And so what a fixed layout means is it's actually rendering things on a coordinate by coordinate basis, like X and Y axis. So this actually will get you as close as possible to what would actually happen on the screen. So if I come back here, you'll see the text pop up pretty much exactly where I put it. The main drawback to this is that it is not responsive, right? So, or rather, it could be responsive, but it's going to be kind of clunky. And what responsive means is a web page that knows how to adjust based on the form factor, based on the size of the screen that you're looking at, right? So, if I took this app and I started to shrink it and move it around, see, there you go. There's already an example. I'm shrinking the screen. Those things are not moving, right? And so, obviously, screens come in all shapes and sizes these days, so that's not the ideal way to build it. What we instead will want to actually do is start to structure our app in a series of groups, right? And so what we can actually do, so let's take a look at how we're set up here. So let's look at the base element, so the page level. And so what we can first do is call this, we can actually start to modify things like the page header. You can, this doesn't necessarily impact the size of the view for the user per se, but this is actually, let's see, let's set this as a column. I think we want to set this as a column. But here we go, right? So builder width, that's basically the width of the screen that you're looking at when you're in the editor. But when you're looking at it in the actual application, it doesn't necessarily set it doesn't necessarily set a fixed width for the application itself. This is more more for your kind of building view, right? Minimum height, you can kind of leave that as is for now. Actually, even set it a little bit lower. And so now, if we come back to these elements, you'll see they're starting to orient themselves. They're starting to stack themselves vertically, right? And that's what a column layout does. I can also use row. So you'll see they're going to start to orient themselves in a row. Align to parent is a good one if you have more of a centrally oriented application where things are more kind of focused on the center. And then you actually literally want to put things in the center or in the corners, so we can actually do that. Like, for instance, if I click this, I can put this in the center, I can put this in the bottom. This is sometimes good if you have, we may actually use something like this for one of the views. In particular, like if you have a Friendtech application, they'll have the menu bar, right? The navigation bar on the bottom. That's pretty good to set as, like, for instance, a bottom-oriented or bottom-aligned element, like this is right now. What you do have to keep in mind is if you set two elements both in the middle, align to parent doesn't do any stacking per se. It's literally just saying, oh, you want that thing in the middle? I'm going to put it smack dab in the middle. And it doesn't really care if there's something already there. You're going to have stuff overlapping. So in this particular case, since we're starting to build out the initial framework, we don't want to stack these things one on top of the other. So we're going to go up here, column. We're going to orient this towards the center. We're going to, and I may start moving a little bit faster here. And now I can take each of these elements, also adjust where horizontally I want them aligned. So now I have this thing using a column-based alignment with the elements centered rather than top or bottom centered, top or bottom aligned. And then the elements themselves, I can adjust left, right, or center. And now if I come back, I'll have something very similar to what I just had, but a big difference is, there you go, now it's responsive. So again, we're starting from some basic concepts, but we're going to start to kind of layer these on more and more so. So progressive web app. Okay, what we're going to need is we're going to need a structure or a framework to present different views of the app based on things like navigation, user actions, etc. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to start adding what's called groups. So you can think of groups as effectively containers, right? They also can come in lots of different shapes and sizes. You'll see the default one just comes in this block, this empty square, 280 by 280. I'm not sure somebody picked that number. I don't know why or how, but that's what it is. Again, since our page is oriented as a column, it's just kind of throwing it into the stack. I'm going to center align it because we're going to want things, kind of in the middle as we're building this web app. But now we're going to start to do some cool things, right? So in this particular case, let's call this, so we're going to do a couple things. First of all, we may want this, let's say this is our loading page, right? This is our welcome page. So if you look at, let's actually just look at Friendtech. And it's going to throw up a little error. Actually, they may have launched their desktop version, so it may not throw an error anymore, actually. Loading page, super simple. Basically center aligned. So we're going to want to do something like this, right? So what I can actually do is drag and drop. Another really nice thing about WYSIWYG editors, Bubble definitely included, it's nice to be able to drag and drop things. And even this is actually something that Bubble more recently added. If I oriented this now, which I think we're going to want to do as, I think we're actually going to want to do this as either aligned to parent or column. Both of those could work. I think let's go for column. And it just, reset itself a little bit, but that's okay. So we're going to want to do a column. I think we're going to want to make this center aligned. And just speaking of drag and drop, again, the cool thing is, even in this side element tree, I can drag things around. And this was not something that Bubble originally had when I started 2 years ago. So it's like even leaps and bounds better than where we were 2 years ago. So again, what we're going to do here is start to orient these in the center. What we'll want to do is actually add a button. I'm going to want to add a button here. And let's do some styling on this thing. We don't necessarily need to copy the exact styling, but you know what? What the heck? We can show you how to do that too. So any page you can inspect. It'll open up your dev console, and you'll start to see some of these parameters, right? And I'm going to close this out so we can just get a full view. And this is true of any page. I can look at any specific elements, open it up, and see things like, for instance, oh, the color, right? So let's take this color. It'll give me a hex value. There you go, 00BAFA. So pretty quickly, and also the other thing you could do if you're really kind of referencing an existing design, border radius. Right, border radius is how rounded the corners are, and so if I come back to our app, we have a button here. Firstly, what I can do is, this is interesting too, right? So I got a primary color here. What if we just go to styles? So again, getting a little more familiar with the Bubble editor. We got design, which is the visual editor. We got workflow, which is for logic. We'll come back to that. Data, which we'll also come back to, but that's where we have all the things we'll create. If you're starting from a blank slate, pretty simple. You just got a user, and that's it. Style. So another thing Bubble's added over the past couple of years, it at least since I've been playing with it, it's always had these preset styles, which you can edit openly and modify and things like that. But they've added style variables, which is kind of cool, right? So, let's say, for instance, I want to change my primary color to that turquoise color. Now, automatically, my button is turquoise. So again, in the past, you had to kind of manually set each of these colors, and the color styles were driven off of like the the element styles. But now you can get it at an even more ground level, right, by setting effectively your palette right at the app level. So what I'm going to do here now, let's also just round this corner out. So I can actually, again, some existing styles, primary button. I'm going to go into edit that style, make it 32 roundness. And you know what? I kind of like the idea of a shadow, but let's make it a little bit more visible. And I like my shadows a little center oriented with, there we go, something a little more subtle like that, right? Look at that. That's a pretty nice button. And I'll say, let's see, sign in. And again, what we want to do is center this. And I'm going to copy and paste. And actually coming back to this, right? So another thing that Bubble's done is you can have a set style. So like we had body here, for instance, meaning body, text in the body of like a paragraph, let's say. I had overwritten it with a color, but let's say we want to reset that, and we want to we can edit this directly. So basically two options here. We can either just clear out the style itself and just create our own style from scratch, or we can edit this style directly and say, I don't want this left aligned, I want it center aligned, I want the text to be vertically centered. Oh, and here's another thing, right? So again, you can do this. One of the benefits of doing a ground up build is you can really start to set your framework early on, right? And set it to your liking. So there's a classic, there's a classic thing in programming, which is build once, use many times, like if you have the option to. And in particular, if you know you're going to use something a lot, then you can save yourself some time and some headache down the road by, investing a little bit more time up front to do it right? So again, if we come back to style variables, we have these global, style style variables, styles that we can change. And in addition to colors, we can change the fonts. So here, like for instance, let's set this to mulish. Let's come back to the element style. And let's say this is going to be, we want some like a muted gray color, right? So we can actually create one here. Gray text. And once again, we can actually come back to Friendtech, do a quick inspection here. Oh, they actually clicked their thingy. So let's inspect their text. And there we go. That's their gray color. So let's get the hex for that. So 868686. We're going to come back for subheader text. So there you go. We got gray header text. We can come in here and drop in that gray value. And now we have a custom color, global color variable that we can use. And then we can do the same thing for fonts. We're not going to do that right now, but again, you can do that for both colors and fonts, and then they'll be widely accessible. And then what we can do here, right, is we can modify it here. What would happen there is we'd be overwriting that particular element style. So just coming back to this, again, Style tab, Element Styles, here's the body. Let's come to the color here, and there we go. There's our custom color. We're going to select that. Maybe let's make this a little bit heavier, so maybe semi-bold, and maybe a little bigger. Let's do this. And now, as soon as I've done that, what we should see is, there we go. Pretty cool. And if I wanted to reset this, there I go. I just hit reset, and now that adjusts. And you'll notice there's a kind of a big space here right now. Actually, one thing here. Let's just put a 32 on the image as well. And yeah, you're starting to kind of see this thing looks and feels, a little bit like an actual application. This will not actually do anything for now, but we'll just kind of put that in. And what we're going to do is we want some spacing here. So we're going to, there's a couple different ways to do this, but one way to do it is just simply to put a top margin. So we're going to put a top margin, maybe a little more. Yeah. And this initial group is going to be set up to fit height, right? And that's I think that's okay. That's kind of what we want. The other thing that kind of makes sense, right? So what we're going to start to do is we're going to start to stack different views. So we got this landing page. We'll probably want another view for obviously the home page eventually when the user gets there, but there's going to be any particular page, right? Even if the user is navigating, hitting nav buttons on the bottom, usually what we'll want is a different group to represent that view. And we're going to start to stack those together, but we're also going to want to group them together in terms of just kind of getting things on a more standard basis, right? So like, for instance, the columns, we're going to want them to be of a certain width. So what I like to do there is actually set up a kind of parent group called content. And let's set the max width for that at 432. So again, we're going to be targeting more of like a mobile screen, but there's no reason why this couldn't be wider, but that's just what we're going to try to do here. And the next thing we're going to do actually, so Friendtech has actually moved beyond this, right? Originally, what they did, which I thought was pretty clever too, was they initially rolled out just targeting mobile devices. And we can do that actually. I'll show you how. We may not kind of put in all the bells and whistles around that, but if we go to plugins and we look for device detector, and there's a free one here, which is I think pretty decent. I think I've used this before. So we have a device detector. What we do then is take the device detector element, drop it into the page, and here's another best practice. I like to put a floating group. This is pretty much what it's described as. It's a group that floats. It doesn't orient itself in a fixed place on the page, or at least relative to other elements. But what I like to do is put it in the bottom right, kind of tucked away. You actually can put it beneath the elements too, but just for now, I kind of want to keep my eye on it. You can shrink it down, so I'm going to make it just a tiny little thing, and I'm going to start to drop my plugins into there. So what have we got here? Device detector. Got it. And again, drag and drop. So it's a small target to hit. So if it was larger, I could drag it over, but much easier is I just want to drag it in the element tree. And there we go. Now it's tucked in there. Now I have a device detector element on the page. What I'm also going to do here, just because I'm a stickler for some of these things these days, is create a little spacing between my elements. There you go. It's, subtle, but and let's see. What we're going to want to do here is start to work with some logic. So page load, right? So the workflow tab, the way to think about it is if this, then that. You want to set up a trigger and then a sequence of actions that the application will take. And so what I'm going to do here is tie a trigger to when the page is loaded. And this is actually exactly what Friendtech did. Again, I think they've, again, kudos to them. They just, opened it up to a desktop experience. But when they first launched, they're basically excluding desktop users. And the way they did that was through device detection. And so what we're going to do here, and let's see if this actually starts to work. Right, so here's the device. And I believe we can actually look at the documentation for this, but one of the outputs is mobile, let's say. I think it's mobile, desktop, and I think they have one for tablet too. But at the end of the day, what this says, and maybe let's just as a little bit of a test, let's just say actually another good one, and this is good because as we're building, we may come across things that we'll need. It's not bad to have a little bit of an alert. So this is one from AirDev. It's pretty nice. Also pretty and free, doesn't hurt, and pretty simple. So we got Air Alert now. We're going to come back. We're just going to throw up a little alert. You're on a mobile device. That's cool. I'm going to copy and paste this because what I want to start to do is just get a little feel for the different types of devices that the plugin is detecting. I think the next one is desktop, but we'll show you also how you can see exactly what's happening. you're on a desktop device. Okay, that's cool. So let's do a quick refresh here on the page. Again, this never gets old. Building, refreshing, and in the olden days, what's happening? Compiling, deploying, all that stuff. It's basically like 1 second now. Oh, cool! Check that out. So it said you're on a desktop device. So what we can do is take a quick look at the device detector, and we'll see these values, right? So that element has code in it, but what it's outputting are these parameters, these characteristics, properties, I should say, rather. And as an app builder, we can read these properties and then drive other logic off of them, right? So we can detect now if it's desktop. And then, for instance, if it's desktop, what we can do is launch a pop-up, right? And again, this is getting a little bit of a sampling of all the things in Bubble. So drop in a pop-up. This will start with a pretty standard kind of look and feel. But what we would, what we could put here is, well, first let's make this a similar layout. Column-based layout, centered. Let's drop an image in here just to make it look a little nicer. And, we can always come back to this, but let's just reuse our prior image. That's fine. Give that a second to load. There we go. It's a very big image. We don't need it to be super big. Let's see, 30, and let's do 1:1. Ooh, now it's super tiny. Okay. All right. So that's centered. We want to put some quick text and actually apply some spacing. And now you see, right, things are starting to stack, right? We're starting to accumulate some of the little investments of time that we put in earlier. And here, like for instance, the stylings are all starting to look pretty good. A desktop device, please open this app on a mobile device to log in. And just because this is all a little scrunched up, let's make this 420. Yeah, let's make it 420. Okay. Again, little styling things here. If I don't want this all kind of scrunched up on the sides, then I can do things like set a margin, right? So margin left and right. Oops, not a 2 margin, 20 margin. And we come back to the workflow. Page is loaded. Let's say instead of throwing this alert, let's throw that pop-up. Show pop-up. There we go. Look at that. You're accessing low-key Web3 on a desktop device. Please open this app on a mobile device to log in. So, number one, what we've done is we've set up we're starting to set up, again, this single-page framework. We've done one of the things that Friendtech did, which was actually kind of clever to start, which is detect the device the user is using. We're using a plugin to do that, just to kind of keep things a little simpler. And again, what they're doing is detecting a mobile device, desktop device, and again, I think a tablet device. So you can do different things. In this case, we're just throwing a pop-up, but you could do any type of logic subsequent to that that you need or want, right? What we also want to do while we're at it is if we go to Settings General, we're going to scroll down, iOS Appearance. So this says iOS Appearance, but it actually applies to Android as well, and this is actually perfect for progressive web applications. So what this does, if I check this, this is how I got my prior app that we looked at briefly at the start to not show the search bar. So what we're going to do is we're going to check these two boxes. effectively hide the search bar, prevent the user from zooming so they don't accidentally put two fingers and get this weird kind of blown out version of the app. And then we actually do some cool stuff like let's drop in our icon. And even, I'm not sure if this will work, but what the heck? Let's drop our icon in there. And yeah, we'll switch back to the phone view in a little bit, but this is really cool, right? So all these little things are trying to add up. If we come back to the design of the app, let's set our goal here. I think what would be really cool is if we are able to log in with Web3 Auth, generate a wallet. So the other thing that's nice about Friendtech is they were using a non-custodial wallet generation, feature where any user who logged in for the first time, and they used Google and I believe Apple, and actually phone number to log in. We'll show how we can actually recreate a similar setup with Web3 Auth. And again, very similarly with something like Web3 Auth, as soon as they log in, that user then has a wallet that they can use, right? Subsequent to that, they have some workflows where you can start to load money into that wallet, crypto into that wallet. We'll maybe leave that for another day. But I think the key thing here is being able to log in and sign up. And then let's say get to a second page, right? So let's jump in. So our Web3 Auth element, we want to drop that in. And again, I like to keep my plugins together. I'm going to drop it into my floating group for plugins. So they're all kind of nicely tucked away in the same place. We want to jump into the Web3 Auth elements and check the network. So just to be clear, the Web3 Auth network is not the chain. It's internal to Web3 Auth. They're naming conventions for different internal, effectively development environments. So we're going to use mainnet, which equates to legacy mainnet on the Web3 Auth screen we saw earlier on the dashboard. And the chain, let's just say for now, let's do Polygon Mumbai. Some recent features we just added, which are kind of nice. So for mobile apps, this is something that came up in our Discord. So quick blurb quick pitch for the Discord for One to All is if you have any interest in Web3 no code, feel free to jump in our Discord. We got a bunch of people there, and myself and others are willing to answer any questions you have about Bubble and Web3. One thing that came up in the Discord was actually a behavior in Web3 Auth where it was trying to launch a pop-up, and I think recently iOS and Apple effectively nixed pop-ups altogether. I mean, you can turn them back on in the settings, but obviously that's not a great user experience. So what we've actually done is this is our most recent upgrade to Web3 Auth is we implemented redirects. So instead of launching a pop-up, it'll take you to a login screen through a redirect and then pop you directly back into the application from effectively where you left off. So that's very handy. And the next thing we want to do here is we're actually going to turn off wallets. So maybe what we can do actually, let's just do a trial run just so we see what Web3 Auth looks like by default. And then just double checking here, anything else we need to put in? I think we're okay. Let's just give it a shot. So we're going to, that'd be good to link up the button. So now we're going to start to get more into the workflows again. So add workflow. I can click a button element on the page, click add workflow, and that automatically drops me into the workflow tab, and I can just start to create an action. In this case, what I'm going to do is create a login action with Web3 Auth. That's pretty much it. That's, I think, all we need. So let's see. I'm going to do a quick refresh. Another nice thing. Okay, we're going to ignore this for now. What I'm going to do here is turn on the debugger step-by-step mode, and so I can see the action as it's progressing. This is another great thing about Bubble, right? It does not lack when it comes to debugging tools, right? Yeah, I think there's some nits and things that I would improve about the tools, but by and large, you have the you're armed, with enough tools and things to be able to figure out what might be going wrong with your application. One of the biggest ones is step by step in the debugger. The other big one is actually pressing F12 on any given app and looking at the console. And this is particularly important if you're starting to do on-chain activity. Sometimes the error messages are not going to come up in the debugger, but they'll show up on the console. So we're going to click step by step. This is cool. Yep, I clicked it. It's going to go into the action. What we should hopefully see, there we go, is the pop-up. And this is it, right? So this is the Web3 auth modal. Notice we didn't have to do any building around this. This was just dropped in by way of taking the Web3 auth plugin, dropping it in. We did sign up for the client ID, which took seconds or maybe a minute. We did whitelist our domain. That's actually a really important step. Sometimes we get questions and stuff around that in the Discord. That's one of the lowest hanging fruit for troubleshooting. But what we have here now is not just what Friendtech has. We have Friendtech Plus, right? Because if we wanted to, we could leave all of these other login experiences. For instance, Twitter. I mean, this is kind of a funny one, right? So what we're actually going to do is have an additional authentication step for Twitter. And we'll kind of come back to that. But you could also just log in with Twitter. Now, when you log in with Twitter and Web3 auth, you don't necessarily get all of the access that to the API, but you do get certain things. You get the email that the Twitter user uses. You get actually a profile image. So we can do that as a starting point. So, but one of the other things that we can do is actually turn off the wallets. And that may seem counterintuitive, but if we're talking about low-key Web3, right, it's actually pretty important, right? Because I've gotten some feedback, now to date worked on over, call it 50 different projects, or at least work with 50 different, project leads, various respects. And we hear a lot of different feedback, right? And for certain niches, the users, at best don't know what a wallet is. It's just an added mental load for them to figure out what is this thing? And in other cases, they actually have a actual negative bias against wallets. It's kind of like the crypto backlash, right? And so, for either of those cases, or just simply for UI purposes, I mean, frankly, I'm pretty comfortable with Web3 stuff these days, but I actually still opt to use, for instance, a Gmail login, because it's just actually easier. It's way easier, not only for the login process, but actually for things like confirming transactions. So the way Web3 auth is set up, signing and confirming transactions effectively happens automatically in their backend. It's still cryptographically secure. They're using your combination of keys effectively in the back to sign things securely, but you don't actually have to click a pop-up every time you want to take an action on chain, which is for me it's kind of nice, and I think that is actually the end goal for UX that we should be targeting, right? Got a quick comment. Welcome, Elena. And answer is yes. This is definitely going to be safe for replay. Any questions as you guys jump on? Feel free to let it rip. So the other thing I'm going to do is start to just cull down the different login options. We could use email. We could use SMS. If we're strictly, let's say, copying, cloning, let's say, Friendtech, we would just actually leave Google, Apple, and SMS passwordless, which is phone. But in our case, let's say we want to leave, 4. We want to leave Google, Facebook, Twitter, Apple, and email and phone. Okay. So we're going to do that. We just made those changes. Again, I'm going to X out of here, do a refresh. And this is cool. If I reload the page with step-by-step turned on, it loads right from the very beginning, the very first trigger and action. So in this case, page is loaded, which is correct. That is the one that I set up to load at the start. I have this pop-up. And now I'm going to do the same thing, sign in, buttons clicked, log in. And there we go. We have a cleaner login experience here. One of the things Web3 Auth did do, I'm not super happy about this, but one of the things they did do was with their most recent upgrade, they put the white label options into their paid, tier. So previous to that, or in theory, some of the things you could do is make this light and dark on the free tier. You can still do that, obviously, if you upgrade, but you can put your logo. So there's certain things you can do to make this just even look and feel, more native. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the Twitter login. Why don't we do that? And the fact that it is reverting to Twitter is a good sign. That means our whitelist, our domain whitelist worked. If your domain whitelist was not set up properly, then you would usually just get an error right away. And it would say, this domain is not whitelisted. But we're good. We actually logged in. You may not see it, but we're actually logged in. And because the app uses cookies just inherently, even if we refresh the page, it should know. So I'm going to let this run now. I might turn off that pop-up now. But we're going to inspect the Web3 auth. And there you go. Check this out. So we got, and there, see, username and profile image. So you can actually pull some things. And wallet address. That is the critical thing, right? Again, what just happened, I logged in for the first time to an application, and it is generating a wallet on my behalf. And in addition to that, if I ever need to export that wallet, there is a function in Web3 Auth to export my private key, right? So again, very similar to Friendtech, where they create a wallet for you, but then you can, export it, put it into MetaMask or whatever, and have access to your funds, your funds from selling all those keys and all that. Then you can do that, and that again I think is a critical aspect of low-key Web3. So what I'm going to do actually is start to build out a second view. Okay, and the second view will be pretty simple. What we're just going to do is actually show. So I'm going to just drop in another group here. Actually, you know what? I am going to copy and paste instead, because some of the basic things we set up here, like for instance, just having it centered and having certain things set up, I like that. So I'm just going to keep that. And pretty simply what we can do here is start to build in some dynamic elements, right? So let's say this is our view to start looking at our profile. And so what I want to do is set up a dynamic reference for the image. I'm going to reference Web3 Auth and reference the profile image now that I have access to, because the user's logged in with a social media account. Secondly, what I can do is now set up similarly another dynamic reference to their username. And this button isn't going to do much for now, but we'll just leave it as is for now. Now, the crux of single page builds, right? We want to only show certain views when the page, is navigated to that view, right? And now obviously, since everything is on one page, we're going to need another identifier, some other variable to let the app know, hey, you should be showing the login page, or hey, you should be showing the profile page. So we're going to do just that. We're going to go to Data, Option Set, and we're going to skip this tutorial for now. We're going to create a new option set. We're going to call this, App Tab, let's say. right? And app tab is going to be pretty simple. It's just going to have a list of page names. Let's say index and profile. And now, yeah, we have a reusable set of variables, which are pretty easily accessible. We don't have to worry about typos or anything like that. And when we come back to our app, we can start to do things like, well, actually, the first thing we're going to do is yeah, I think we're going to get data from the page URL. The parameter name is going to be tab, and this will make more sense in a little bit when we come back to this. The parameter name is going to be tab, and we want, oh, actually, and the other critical thing is the type. So it could be text. What we're doing here is we're going to store and pass values in the URL, right, in the actual address bar for which view we want to be looking at. And we could pass that around as text, but we want to do actually to make it more foolproof is actually use the data type we just created, this option set app tab. And so you'll see something kind of, again, subtle but cool, is now when I set up the logic, I don't have to type anything in. I can just pick and choose, right? So now I just click index, and now I've set up a condition when the page is on tab index, or let's say, or data from URL, and again, we want tab, and again, we're looking for an app tab. If it's empty, because if we're loading for the first time and the user's just coming in, then this view should be visible. Otherwise, we're going to set, this is also key, we're going to set it to be invisible to start and also collapsed. If you don't set it to be collapsed, you're going to see a big empty space there, and it's going to look a little funny because the other view you're going to have is going to be pushed down. So you do want it to be collapsed when hidden. And let's do a similar thing here. Again, these are some of the things that are starting to build up. I can copy this condition. I don't have to necessarily redo that entire condition. Paste it. I don't need the or here, right? Because that's going to be unique to the index page. That's going to be the starting point. But what I do want is if the tab is profile, I'm going to show this other view. And again, same thing. I want this to be hidden to start. Yep. And let's see here. Let us now set up a workflow where if the user is connected, right? Well, actually, we're going to do two things. So the way Bubble handles users and logins is they actually have a specific workflow for logging in the user and logging out the user. So it's important to understand that distinction because when I log into Web3 Auth, Web3 Auth is connected, but as far as Bubble knows, the user has not logged in yet. So we actually need to do two actions back to back. And the second one is to, let's say sign the user up if they haven't signed up before. If they have signed up before, we want to log their user in, right? So there's a couple of actions there. We're not going to focus on that in this particular stretch right now, because I want to kind of get to some of the Twitter login stuff. But just so you're aware, right? If I'm going to key something off of the user being actually logged in, we're going to need, again, these bubble level steps, right? Sign the user up, log the user in, log the user out, etc. Now, what we're going to do is, for now, we're just going to key off of Web3 Auth being connected. So again, triggers, if this then that, right? So if Web3 Auth is connected, we want to do a second thing, what we're going to do is we're actually going to navigate to the profile page. And again, single page application, the way we're going to do that, this may seem a little funny, but we're going to go to the page. We're actually going to come back to our page, which is the index page, but we're going to send a parameter. And we'll see in the actual address bar how this will show up. So we're going to send a tab, and we're going to get an option. So if you create an option set, this is how you retrieve different option sets. It knows it's app tab because we only have one option set so far. And we want to set it to be profile. And the reason why it's asking me for more information here is because profile is the object. It doesn't directly translate into text. And we're going to have to specify, we want that profile, that option object, we want the display, which is text. And now it's good, right? Now it's showing, blue is copacetic, right? Like if it's if the variable or expression is blue, then Bubble's happy. Now, what we should see when we log in or if we refresh, it may happen pretty quickly. So I'm going to turn on step by step. And what we would see here is number one, page is loaded. It's going to throw the pop-up, which is okay. And there you go, right away, Web3 Auth is connected. Go to page index, tab, set to profile. And now you see in the URL right up here. So if you ever see a web page with a question mark and then, blah equals blah, and then an ampersand and blah equals blah, there might be like a whole series of, blah variable equals blah value. Those are parameters. That's actually the HTML way of passing pretty basic variables, but we can do a lot of things with those variables. So, and we might get into a little bit of an endless loop here, but look at that. We logged in with our Twitter account. We're able to pull in our Twitter profile. It's a bit low res here, but that's because it's passing through Web3 Auth. And we have our Twitter username. What we're going to do subsequent to this, we're actually going to use this button, so this second button here. And we're going to authenticate our user with the actual Twitter API. So I was looking into this a little bit last night. There are some things that require setup actually in the Twitter developer application. So if you do, search for Bubble Twitter auth, Bubble actually has a specific page for how to sign up and log in. It's a little bit outdated just in that technically it's referring to their V1 API, but I'll show you the specific thing that you need to do to actually get it to work. I think they don't. Let's see. Yeah, so they don't mention the callback URL. So I'll kind of point that out. But basically, you need to go to the developer portal for Twitter, which is here, developer.twitter.com. Sign up, and they make you fill out a little bit of a questionnaire, whatnot, but it's not too bad. Once you sign up, you should get access to something like this screen. You want to go to products. Actually, is it products or projects? Projects, sorry. You want to go to projects, go to either create a new project, or I think there's a default one that just gets spun up. And you'll see some stuff here, app ID, whatnot. You're going to want to go to keys and tokens. I'm not going to obviously jump in here, although I don't necessarily plan to use this API key very often. But you hit regenerate, and these are the ones you want, consumer, key, and secret. And we'll come back to the app here, and we're going to add another plugin. And this will be actually the official Twitter plugin from Bubble. So we're going to install that. And this is actually where we're going to pop in those values. So I may do that. You know what? I'm just going to pop them in and let's say I'll regenerate them. Again, I don't plan to use these keys. So let's see. Let's say we regenerate. Yeah, I think that's what we want to do. So let's regenerate. We got the consumer key, which will drop in here, and the secret, which will drop in here. And as far as setting up the API keys, we're pretty much set, except for one more thing. Yes, to save them. We want to come back to the app settings. We want to edit the app details, and actually, let's back out. Not the app details. Authentication settings. I think this is what, yes, so this is it. Here we go. So the key thing is this entry right here, callback URI, okay? So we want actually to take, it's similar to the domain whitelisting. We want to take this whole root here and add it as a callback. And actually, I'm going to remove my prior one just to make this a bit cleaner, and save that. And hopefully, what we'll see is that that'll do the trick. So coming back to our app, again, now we have a single page application, right? We have one page that is showing different views based on how we're navigating. And what we're going to do actually is, and this may be where we kind of pause, part one after we, get this up and running. But what we're going to do is actually do another one of the key steps that Friendtech did, which is effectively have all of their user authentication flow through the Twitter login, right? And all of the user, user profile information and stuff was just pulled directly from that. So, number one, it makes sure users are, at least to some degree, real people. But secondly, from a pure UX perspective, it's pretty handy because what basically happens then is they save you a bunch of steps as a user. It's kind of like the whole cumbersome, like, oh, I got to fill in my first name, last name, put in my image, put in my my social media like usernames and all that stuff, right? It's like a whole form you have to put in. So they just compressed all of that and just made everybody sign up from Twitter. So let us do a similar thing here. So again, click add workflow. Because we installed the plugin, we can use this option here, sign up login with the social network. And we have Twitter as the option here, right? And that's basically the secret sauce right there. So let's try it out. So because I'm refreshing with these parameters up top, tab equals profile, and because Web3 Auth still remembers me, just based on cookies and things like that, I'm actually going to turn off that pop-up. So again, pretty simple thing I can do is just disable a workflow. We'll see this grayed out. So we'll come back. And I'm going to do a quick answer. Cool. So again, I'm going to turn on step by step. We are going to click authenticate, which is going to take us down the OAuth path. Again, this is a really good sign we're seeing this page. Otherwise, we would have seen an error. And we're back. Now, what's the difference? The difference is if we inspect, actually, you know what? You know what we're going to do? Let's create one more page here. And we're going to create another trigger. So now that the user is logged in, or should be logged in, we're going to create one more page. And again, I'm just going to dupe and revise here. I'm going to copy this and paste. So I have another view here, but what I'm going to do is actually create another option in the tab option set. Let's just call it Twitter for now. And the key thing we're going to do here is, instead of referencing the Web3 auth parameters, we're actually going to go to the user. And look at this. We got this object here called Twitter, which is new. That's only because we installed the plugin and the bubble plugin, the official Twitter bubble plugin. And now if we click Twitter, this is cool stuff, right? We can get their picture, we can get their banner count, we can get their follower count, we can get their handle. And let's just say for fun, below this, I'm going to put the follower count. And if you're looking at Friendtech, and if you've ever logged in, those are some of the things that come out of the box, and they kind of start to put some of those elements. Certainly, the username and the picture is, front and center. And the way we're going to handle this is, again, very similarly, this is only going to be visible if the tab parameter in the URL is set to what I'm looking for, which is Twitter. And then again, similarly, if the user's logged in, I want to copy this, modify, and go to the page, but not the profile page. I want to go to Twitter page. And hopefully what we'll see, actually, once I refresh this, it should actually do all of that, because again, because of cookies, the application knows I'm logged in. So it'll pick that up. It'll say, oh, you're logged in. It'll jump into that next workflow. It'll navigate me back to this same page, but with the tab pointing to Twitter instead of profile. So let's see what happens. I'm going to turn on step by step. Connected. So it knows I'm connected. And actually, let's see here for a second. Another way we could do this actually is, if it's connected, and here we'll start to use some conditionals, because it may be picking up the Web3 auth connection first. And what we'll do is, if the current user's Twitter name, we could use any other variable, but just for now, let's just try this out. If the current user's Twitter name is empty, then we'll go to the regular profile page, the Web3 auth page. If it is not, let's go to the Twitter page. Is not empty. And so I'm just going to, that's kind of why this is not working either, is because I put users logged out. But anyway, I'm gonna just disable this for now. And let's see here. This should work as well. So let's do a quick refresh. We got step-by-step turned on. Web3 auth is connected. So now you can see some of the cool things that Twitter does as well. Here, right, we're running a quick conditional. It's an if statement, right, or a when. Like, only run this when or if this subsequent expression is true. And so the cool thing here is anything that's blue in the debugger, I can click in the quote unquote double click into, literally dive into and see the details step by step. So for this expression, I can see the user that's logged in, or a current user actually, because we're not technically logged in per se, but here's the Twitter, and there's, all the different values, name, and it's not empty, so this is failing. So this condition is correctly failing. This one is correctly triggering to be true, which should take us back to the tab. And there we go. You'll notice the image is higher res, thankfully. We got our handle, same as through Web3 Auth, but now we also have our follower count. And again, we can pull in other things. If we just take a quick look at what else is available here, we got the ID number, the description, which could be handy, the banner, location, so some cool stuff. Maybe not as much as is actually available through the API, but again, for Friendtech's purposes, they don't really do, I think, anything beyond like just pulling in some of the basic stuff. They use it more primarily for authentication purposes, and it is that's basically how it's set up. So we are hitting the hour-and-a-half mark. Time flies when you're building. What the last thing I want to do, actually, unless there's any questions, the last thing I want to do is actually share my screen from my mobile and do a quick, just kind of see how it looks on the mobile screen and share that actually with everybody too, so we can kind of see the full effect. Again, this is part one, so if there's interest and that people find this interesting, there's a whole lot of other stuff that I think Friendtech has done pretty well that we could dive into. But I think at the core, right, some of the things we've covered here are the concept of a progressive web application, an application that's built using traditional web technology, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, etc., but looks and feels like a mobile app and can also be installed on the user's computer. On the user's mobile device. So actually, maybe that's the next thing we'll do, right? Which is we'll detect the mobile, and this is a very subtle thing, but one of the big things that kind of was a little bit of an aha for me was the way Friendtech actually just walked people through, like, hey, this is how you install this application. You just do this for Android and do this for iPhone, right? We're not going to differentiate in our case, per se, but if you are using Android device, click Settings and select Save to Home. Actually, to install Android device, Settings, and select Save to Home. I think that should do it. Let's see. Oh, no, wait. We have to pop this up. So if, again, we're using this device detector for anybody who's joining late, we have a plugin that's the device detector. If it detects mobile, I'm going to show that pop-up B, pop-up mobile. And, all right, next thing we're going to do is drop this into the chat. And the funny thing is, if anybody wants to actually try to load it up, they could. Oops. Oh, okay, yeah. So there we go. So I'm going to actually load this up from my mobile. And okay. Oops. Share screen. And apologies, this takes a little bit of time. Okay, so let's move on over here. Let's see what we got. So I'm on my mobile. I'm loading up the page. Our good old classic bubble default username password. Look at that. To install this on an Android device, click Settings and select Save to Home. Click Settings. Okay, the wording I got a little bit wrong, but add to home screen. And look at that, the logo. Add to home screen. And we got a low-key Web3 mobile app loaded with a loading screen. We're going to sign in. Should we use our Twitter? Yes, we're going to use our Twitter. We got the redirect running. So this should work perfectly okay on okay, I'm going to move away from the screen. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing momentarily as I log in here. Here we go. Stop sharing. And then I'll revert back real quickly. Okay. I think that should do it. Yeah, okay. And I'll come back. Share the screen again. Apologies, this is a bit of a back and forth here. But there we go. We logged in. Nice thing about Web3 Auth, they do give you the option built in for multi-factor authentication. We're not going to go with that for now. But look at that. We did it. We have a single page progressive web application. I'm going to do authenticate and let's see. Okay, cool. So I don't have to log in again. And there we go. High res. There's our username. There's our followers. We got a bit of the, kind of the simple Friendtech UX, blank white page with some blue buttons on it. But this thing is working, man. So hope that was interesting for folks. We're going to, again, if there's interest, we're going to keep this going. But this is the ground. This is the foundation, right? This is the groundwork we need to then take this even further to build all these subsequent things like the homepage with the navigation buttons, and eventually what we can do too is actually build in some of the funding workflows, so being able to receive tokens, and then I think the big one, right, which is going to be interesting. It's going to be new territory for me as well, actually, which is looking at their bonding curve, looking at their Solidity contract, which has that interesting behavior of buying and selling tokens, or keys as they call it, and having the price dynamically go up and down based on the number in circulation. That is also definitely an area of exploration there. So with that, I'm actually going to wrap this one up. But again, hope people have enjoyed this. I think this is a really good intro for anybody, again, who's new to Bubble. What we did, you could do too by just following along, because we did do this from literally a blank slate, one empty page. But hopefully you can start to see the framework and the structure of it, so that you too can then take what we built and extend it, right? So you can take your own single page application workflow and UX and work through it and build your own cool stuff with Web3. So thanks everybody who's tuning in, and anybody else who's watching this recording down the road. Yeah, stay tuned. We'll have a follow-up at some point, probably next week, same time, same place. And if you have any questions, also feel free to hit me up on Twitter or jump into our Discord. The links are all in the description. Awesome. Take care, everybody.